start in 1 minute. Okay, hello, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining our session today, online tour of Museum of Jewish People at Beit Hatfutsot in Israel. We have with us, as you can see, Shula and Yael. For those of you, who don't know who we are a Jewish nonprofit organization based in San Francisco. My name is Sapira, I'm the program director of JIMENA. Our mission is to achieve universal recognition for the heritage and history of almost 1 million Jewish refugees from the Middle East and in North Africa and their descendants. JIMENA programs aim to ensure that the accurate history of Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews is incorporated into mainstream Jewish and Middle Eastern narrative in order to create balance in attitude, narrative, and discourse about Middle Eastern refugees and the modern Jewish experience. We operate through engagement initiative, education, and advocacy programs. I highly encourage you to join our website, www.jimena.org, to learn a little bit more about us and our upcoming programs and events. We have a lot of web-based programs. They're all on the website, and if you missed anything, all the videos are there, so you can watch any of our past events as well. I also want to disclose to you that this session is being recorded and will be available on our Facebook and website, and we're actually also live on Facebook at the moment. So hi to all our friends on Facebook. The session is in webinar mode, so we cannot hear or see you, but you can definitely use the chat box down below to write any thoughts or comments or questions for Yael, and she'll try to address them at the end of the session. Someone so excited, thank you. I'm also gonna write our website down below so you can visit after the session. We're gonna also add the website of Beit Hatfutsot, so you can visit the website as well. Our speaker today is Yael Rosen. Yael is the Director of International Program at the Museum. She's a wonderful educator. I watched her speaking at a different session, and I immediately asked her to do a session for JIMENA. But before we start with Yael, we are very honored to have with us at this session Shula Bahat. Shula is the CEO of Beit Hatfutsot of America. She would like to say a few words and welcome everyone. So Shula, we'll start with you and then we'll start the session.
Thank you very much, Sapir. I'm very honored to be here today, and welcome to you, Yael. Beit Hatfutsot seeks to work in partnership with like-minded organizations, and JIMENA is our partner par excellence. We share the vision and the values of JIMENA, and by wanting to tell the entire and unique story of the Jewish people, a story that is 4,000 years long. And we share, Sapir, with you the desire to include in that story, and we are included in that story in a very prominent place, Jews from Arab lands that JIMENA is representing so well. So what do? We have a venue in Tel Aviv. We have exhibitions, a museum that is going to be the largest Jewish museum in the world, 66,000 square feet, and is going to open on schedule, notwithstanding the crisis that we are in the midst of. It's going to open in the fall on time, and those of you who will be in Israel and those of you who are in Israel are welcome to come and take the virtual tour that you'll get from Yael further. We want to really add value to Jewish life, and we do it not just through our venue and through the museum, but through a variety of platforms that I'm not going to outline now. There are many of them, but variety of platforms that enhance Jewish identity, enhance understanding of the Jewish people, Yael, for example, works in one of our most important platform, and that's the Koret International School for Jewish Peoplehood. What I want to do is to read to you not my description of Beit Hatfutsot, but that of Steve Forbes, the chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, who called the enterprise of Beit Hatfutsot a most relevant, vital, and significant global venue that affected and transformed millions of people in Israel and around the world. The story and the experience of people living among other people for millennia, sustaining their identity and core values, contributing magnificently to the general society in every arena, is most compelling, captivating, and powerful in its universal meaning and resonance. And that's what Yael is going to take us through. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Toda Rabba, and thank you, Sapir, for organizing, and I'm very happy to meet you all. And I'm excited to give you a glimpse of Beit Hatfutsot, the Museum of the Jewish People. And I'm now going to take off my virtual background right now because I can see it's doing funny things. So I'm going to take that out after you've seen where we are. We often say that the Jewish people are the people of the book. And we also, at the museum, we like to add another title, and that is the people of stories. Our motto at the museum is "You are part of the story." Each one of us has our own personal story, and that personal story is part of a story that's much greater than us. And what I want to do today in the short time we're together is I want to take you on a tour of the museum, but we're going to be doing a bit of a different type of tour. I always like to say that Beit Hatfutsot is not just a museum. It's really an idea. It's an idea of bringing those stories together, both the personal and the international, bringing stories from different communities together, what links different communities together, and how each of our communities unique as well. So when I say Beit Hatfutsot is an idea, that idea really comes across 3 different pillars of our work. And we're going to touch upon each of those 3 pillars. One is the museum. Shula mentioned that the museum, the exhibits, and the new core exhibit that we're building. I'm going to show you something from our current exhibit and a preview of the new exhibit. The second pillar is the database center, one of the biggest database centers in the Jewish world, now going online, and we're going to present that as well. And the third, and this is where this is also my role at the museum, is the educational center, the Koret International School for Jewish Peoplehood Studies. What we do is work with groups at the museum, but also how do we connect content with the museum with Jewish communities around the world. And we're going to focus obviously on communities from the Middle East and North Africa, but not only, and we're going to see different connections. I want this to be a discussion, so please feel free to write on the chat. Some of the questions I'll answer while we're talking, some I might answer towards the end. If you're writing on the chat, please pick the option of writing to all panelists and attendees, so that way everyone can see your questions. And just to start off, I know we're logged on from all over. I always like to start off with this question with groups of all ages. If you can write me the countries where you were born, and maybe going back 2 or 3 or even 4 generations, the names of the countries where your grandparents or great-grandparents were born. So please feel free to do that in the chat. You can introduce yourselves or just write write the countries. I'll say that I was born in the United States. Now I live in Israel, and if I go back a few generations, then my great-grandparents came from Ukraine, from Moldova, and from Belarus, even though I know I look a bit more like the Yemen part. Okay, so we have US, we have Iraq, 2,600 years, amazing, Morocco, Pale of Sediment, Scotland, England, amazing, New Zealand, France, Cairo, Egypt, Colombia, and Iraq, Iran, Mexico City, thank you. Amazing. This is great. So and feel free to continue writing. And it's amazing to see that even in this one group here, Belarus, Poland, Germany, Kiev, Poland, Germany, USA, Odessa, New York. So even in this one group, look how many countries we just mentioned. And if we were to go outside of the museum in Tel Aviv, or actually in normal routine and not during Corona times, even the museum is now opened according to the Ministry of Health guidelines. If we were to ask people the same question, we would get even more answers, right? We would get Australia, and we would get Italy, and Chile, and Brazil, and Canada, and Mexico, et cetera, and et cetera. And really what we do at the museum is try to tie these stories together and see how we are connected. Here I see we have Azerbaijan and Italy. So thank you. So now I'm going to share my screen. We're going to start up of a short visit to our synagogue gallery called Hallelujah. You can write on the chat if you've been to the museum in the past, and also if you've been in the last 4 years. What you're going to be seeing now is something from our previous core exhibition, which you might recognize, which is instated in a new gallery altogether. So I'm going to be sharing my screen right now, and we're going to go upstairs together to the gallery. And as I said, we're going to be focusing on synagogues from around the world, but with special connections, obviously, to our partnership with JIMENA. So right now we're going upstairs, and you can see this beautiful display hanging above us. It's not a rug or an art mural like some people like to say. And this is a ceiling of a synagogue from Khodorov in Ukraine. Some of you mentioned that some of the families are from Ukraine. And if we look closely, we can see that there's an outburst of color here, right? The color is very, very vivid. And, but we also see a lot of interesting animals here. We can see turkeys and eagles and a unicorn right here. We also see a lobster, not all kosher animals even. And the question is, what are all these animals doing in this ceiling? We know that a lot of synagogues from Eastern Europe at that time were built in that way. And here we have a demonstration of different symbolism in the synagogue. We have here the zodiac, but we also have the animals, elements from the Far East, things that were considered very majestic or kingdom-like, brought into the synagogue. But I want to focus here on the wall facing east, facing towards Jerusalem, towards Yerushalayim. And here we have the artist, Yisrael Snitsky, from the 18th century. When he drew it, he drew a picture of Jerusalem. Now, if we look here, those of you who have been to Jerusalem, seen pictures of Jerusalem, this does not quite look like Jerusalem. And when we think about it, it's quite amazing, because when he drew Jerusalem, he had never been to Jerusalem. Right? He prayed towards Jerusalem. He dreamt of Jerusalem. But when he had to paint Jerusalem, he had to translate it into his mind of how he believed it to look. And I think that's really interesting. If we looked at each of the communities where your families have come from, we can see different translations to that concept of the connection to Jerusalem, or of different customs from around the world. And in each country, in each community, we'll see how they translate differently. So from Ukraine, I want to now then proceed to a different place, to Syria. Unfortunately, we're not able to visit the remains of this synagogue today, but what we're looking at is one of the remains of a synagogue very, very early on, from the 2nd and 3rd century, from Dura Europus. Looking closely, if we're looking at how, we always like to talk about at the museum of how a community tells its story, right? What does a community focus on? Right? We can tell a story through art, through music, through architecture. And here, this community brings different scenes from the Bible. We can see this is the story of the holiday of Purim. We're going to see a different holiday in a second. One thing that's interesting here when we look at this synagogue is we can see that their faces, something that some synagogues have, but many synagogues don't. We know the second commandment is against imagery, and here we do see that in this synagogue. Yes, there were people's faces, and also there was a mixture of cultures. This was on the border of the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire, and we see both those elements in the dress that's right here. We're going to see that a bit more closely in a second when we're focusing on this painting right here. This is the story of Passover, of Moshe, of baby Moses being saved by Pharaoh's daughter. And in the next mural, we'll be able to see the story of the Exodus from Egypt as well, with the children of Israel crossing the Red Sea right here. And we can just imagine that when this was drawn in that area, if this same scene was drawn in a different place, it might be a similar scene, but the people might look different. They might be dressed differently, right? Because every synagogue or every community translates this to be close to them. The remains of Dor Europos were actually discovered by British archaeologists in the 1940s. The remains were on the outskirts of the town and were actually fortified under sand when the city needed to be fortified, and that's actually how they were preserved. The remains were then brought to the museum in Damascus, and we hope that they're doing okay there. Hopefully someday we will be able to visit and see for ourselves. So from Syria and from the Roman and Persian empires, we're now going to a synagogue that maybe some of you have been to. Feel free to share on the chat if you've been to, and I would love to hear your experiences. And this is from Amsterdam, from Holland. We're looking at the Spanish-Portuguese synagogue right here. And when we're looking closely, we can also see, I want you to take a look at the lamps that are right here, and also at the seats that are facing each other. And we're going to talk about that a bit later. When looking at the synagogue, we can see that the lamps are made out of candles. I'm going to go back in a second. Here you might see it a bit more closely here. And when I take kids around, I always ask them to guess how many candles are here. And sure enough, 613 candles, right? Numbers can tell a story, a symbolic number, the number of mitzvot, the commandments, taryag mitzvot. And it's always fascinating. And here, you mentioned on the chat that this is like the synagogue in London as well, correct? And we're going to see another place around the world that has this minhag, this custom as well. And this is very, very special because this synagogue does not have any electricity in the sanctuary. It's only lit up by candles. So when having regular Shabbat prayers, very often those services happen in a side room. But there are a few times a year, and especially on Yom Kippur, when the synagogue is lit up by the candles, and really a beautiful burst of light telling that story. So just like you mentioned, we can see symbolism in various Spanish Portuguese synagogue. And here we can see that again right now. If we look inside, we can see a similar lamps, and that's because now we're on the island of Curacao in the Caribbean. If anyone's been there, please feel free as well, and to share. And we can see there's a similarity here to the same lamps, to the same community from similar origins. But I want us to take a look in a second at the floor of this synagogue. This synagogue, the floor of this synagogue is made out of sand. And I actually want to show you, I prepared a picture to show you that was taken by one of our museum educators that was actually visiting there recently. You can see here on the screen, you can see the picture. This is a synagogue from inside. You can see the sand on the floor. And the question is, why is there sand on the floor of this synagogue? So as you know, there's never one answer, and there are always quite a few opinions here, but one of the opinions that I like to bring is the sand telling a story. We know that this community didn't originate in the Caribbean, right? It came from, before coming to the Caribbean, it came from Holland, and before Holland, from Portugal and Spain. And in the Spanish Inquisition, sand was used on the floor. So when Jews would come together and pray together, their voices wouldn't be heard and their footsteps were muffled, so they wouldn't be caught. And we can see how that symbolism of sand telling their story is brought in to this building as well. Another reason that that is more of a symbolic reason is that the sand reminds us of a story as well. We just saw in Dura Europus, we just saw imagery of leaving Egypt, and also here sand symbolizes the leaving of 40 years in the desert. And maybe here this community felt that this was another stop on their journey. And thank you, Mike, for sharing on the chat that we were there on Sukkot. Amazing, fascinating, as the service is in Hebrew, English, and Ladino. And the rabbi is also the Chazan. They're actually having a new associate rabbi getting there very soon, and we recently had them on one of our tours. And very, very interesting about the population of this synagogue as well. So from the Caribbean, and we can see, and if we're looking on the outside of the synagogue, this is not necessarily a building that we would guess to be a synagogue. There is a bit of Hebrew over here when entering, but that can also tell us a story. So from the Caribbean, I want us to then continue to Poland. Some of you mentioned also the families are from Poland. And when looking on the outside here, I always like to ask is, does this look like a synagogue? Now, pretending I can see you on the video, I assume I would have faces going like this and faces going like that. And the truth is, everyone's right. Looking on the outside, first of all, we do see some Jewish symbols. On the top here, there's a Magen David, there's the 10 Commandments, the Luchot HaBrit on the outside, and also a menorah. But we also see that this building is in the shape of a cross, and it might look like a church. And here we can see that the architect of this synagogue built many churches as well, and that we can see that style that's brought here as well. And this is something that we can see across the world, and we're going to see this on our next stop as well, from a different part of the world, is the influence. Anywhere where a Jewish community is, we're always influenced and influenced back. And here we can see the influence of the outer culture as well. But looking inside the synagogue, we can see that this is a huge sanctuary. This sanctuary was opened in 1878. Obviously, the community there when it was opened could not imagine what would happen 70 years later. The seats in this synagogue sat over 3,000 people. I'm not sure I mentioned, it's called the synagogue on Telomatska Street in Warsaw. And I want us to take a look here at the Chanukiah. The Chanukiah is one of two on each side of the ark. And right now, right here, we're seeing the original as well. Here, when we're looking at this Chanukiah, this is one of the two of the Chanukiyot that were the only things that were saved from this synagogue. And how did that happen? In 1939, when the Nazis invaded Poland, members of this synagogue and the rabbi felt that hard times were to come. And what they did is they auctioned off this synagogue, these Chanukiyot. And they were bought by a Swedish baroness who, with that money, they were able to help members of the community escape. They were hidden and later got to her. And years later, there was, after the State of Israel was founded, there was a letter received. And in that letter was from the Swedish baroness was, I have something that belongs to you and I want to give it back. And she sent over these two Chanukiyot They belong to Heichal Shlomo in Jerusalem. One is displayed at our museum, and the other one is in Heichal Shlomo in Jerusalem. Again, telling the story of and honoring the memory of this community right here. But from Poland, I then want to stop off at our next destination, which is in Morocco, in Fez, in this synagogue. And I want us to take a look right here. First of all, here on the left, we can see the Kiseh Shel Eliyahu, the Elijah's chair, the original from this synagogue, from the Ibn Dinan synagogue, here used during the Brit Milah, during the circumcision of a baby boy. And looking here in the community, in this synagogue, these are models from around the world. And this model could really tell us some very, very special things. So first, we're going to look at the columns of this of the synagogue. The columns painted in blue, right? The light blue used, adapted into the Jewish community to ward off the evil eye. And also, if we're going to look at these lamps here, we don't see candles, but we see chamsot. The hand, and we can see as Sapir has on her Zoom, we can see the chamsa also adapted from Muslim faith into Jewish culture. And looking back right at here, we can also see the seating in this synagogue, as is very custom in many synagogues from Middle Eastern and North African countries, right, is facing each other. And it's Sephardi, from Sephardi synagogues on whole. We saw that also in Amsterdam as well. And here we can see here that they're not even just facing each other, they're also in small clusters. And here, this is something that I always like to mention, that of the concept of a synagogue, right? If we talk about what happens at a synagogue, we're talking about so many things, right? We're talking about a place of prayer, but also a place of celebrations, bat mitzvahs, baby namings, weddings, memorial services. What else happens at a synagogue? We have of kiddush and luncheons, coming together, eating, a place of tzedakah, of community, helping others. And we see that with the word of the name of the synagogue, right? In Hebrew, it's a bet knesset. It's a house of gathering. It's not just a bet tefillah, a house of prayer. It's a place of gathering. And here recently, we had a few months ago, a visitor who grew up from a similar Moroccan synagogue, and he remembered, and it was so nice to hear him. First of all, when he recalled this, he had this huge smile on his face, and if anyone here has what to share, I would love to hear that as well. Is he talked about how in his synagogues, he had the small clusters of chairs as well, facing each other, which first of all also creates a connection during prayer, right? We're praying together, but also he said that when off prayer time, the synagogue would be a meeting place. They would come, drink their tea together. It would be a place where people would come and congregate and really bond together. And we can see that symbolism also here in these small clusters as well. So just before we go on to the next part of the tour and a glimpse into something from the new exhibit, I want to show you the last model here that I prepared for you, and that's actually in the United States. We're going to see it in a second. We talked about how any building or any place can tell a story. And right now we can see, even looking on the outside, we can see how this building tells a story. What you're looking at here is the synagogue in Newport, Rhode Island, one of the earliest synagogues and the earliest active synagogue in North America. And we can see how it's slanted, right? Here's the street, and the synagogue is on a slant. And even just by seeing that, we can see how how this is telling a story and facing Jerusalem, correct? The Touro Synagogue in Newport, Rhode Island. Going inside, we're also going to be able to see a picture in a second of George Washington. Sometimes we get asked actually at the museum groups that are not from the United States or not familiar with American history, and they'll ask us, who's that rabbi? And we'll say, yes, it's George Washington, the first president of the United States of America. And here we have a remnant of the special piece of history from this synagogue which was founded a number of years before the Declaration of Independence, but then sent a letter to George Washington, and George Washington responded to this synagogue, the famous words that really forged the foundation for religious freedom in the United States. Every year there's a reenactment of that in the synagogue as well, the reading of this letter. Another very interesting thing of the synagogue, and those of you who have been may remember that under the bima, where the Torah scroll is read, there's a trapdoor. And that was, so we can say that maybe members of the synagogue built that trapdoor if they, maybe from places where they came from, if they needed to hide, but that was used about 100 years later during the Civil War as a stop on the Underground Railroad when slaves from the South were escaping towards freedom in the northern states and found refuge at this synagogue. So again, we see how the values of this community are incorporated here as well. This is our first part, and now I want to take you on a glimpse of something that's going to be in our new exhibit. So Shula mentioned that we're opening the new core exhibition later this year, and one of the displays that we saw here different synagogues and models of synagogues, both from the past and present. And one of the things that's very important for us to show is also the Jewish world today. So I prepared a preview here of this display. I'm again sharing my screen. What you can see here is this display called Community or Combat Unity. What we see here is going to be a huge touch screen of Jewish communities from around the world. The idea is to see a live glimpse of Jewish communities today. I'm also going to share this on the chat because we would love for you to upload your communities as well and be included here in the museum. And here I picked two to show today. One here is this is from the Sephardic Kehillah Center in Canada. Has anyone been there, by the way, or is anyone familiar with it? This is from Toronto, and right here we can see that this is an example for what the stories of the communities that are brought in this database, which is also a live display. We can see there are many pictures here, right? We can see pictures of, in this case, it's a synagogue. We can see different activities here as well. We can see the snow, of course, Canada, right? But we can also see different questions that are geared toward each community here, right? So one is, what Jewish aspects characterize your community? And they say here, our community is a predominantly Sephardic, and therefore the religious spectrum of observance spans the entire spectrum. You can read here, from non-observant to ultra-Orthodox. Shares a common Sephardic history, includes Moroccans, Yerushalmis, Egyptians, Bukharians, Indians, Iranians, and Iraqi Jews, and many others. We have here where they meet, and how might they encourage their children to be an active part of their community. And it's fascinating to see how each community here really defines themselves. And sometimes we're very active, or we have our day-to-day lives and routine in our community. And this enables us sometimes to look from the outside and say, how do we define ourselves? What's important? How do we present ourselves to the wider world as well? The next, the other community here that is another one here that is displayed is the Jewish community of Jerba in Tunisia. As you know, one of the oldest Jewish communities in the world. And here we have a variety of pictures from the community. Some of the buildings, the famous buildings of the white with the blue, some of the different ceremonies there. There's also one of the famous Lag BaOmer ceremony, some of the people. And this brings this communities alive. And I'm sure, and for us as a museum, this is very important to us as well, because I'm not sure that many people might visit the museum and might be from Tunisia or know people from there, but not be acquainted with the community there right now. So we can see some of the about their the history of this community and also their vision for the future. This is a picture that I love as well. So if I mentioned that when we talked about Beit Hatfutsot as an idea, we talked about the first is the museum, the exhibits that are coming alive. We visited a number of Jewish communities from around the world with the models that are in our synagogue gallery. But you also saw a glimpse into the core exhibition of the new museum, which also focuses on the past, but also very much on the present as well. And from the next stop I wanted to share with you today is the Database Center. As I mentioned, Beit Hatfutsot database is one of the biggest in the Jewish world. And here we have a very, very special partnership with JIMENA as well. One of the visions for the Database Center with the renewal of the museum is making sure that the resources, as much as possible, are online so that we can be accessible to anyone around the world. We very much want you to come and visit the museum, and we look forward to that. But if we have these amazing resources in our archives, we want them to be accessible for people around the world. And that is something that is a very big endeavor that the museum has taken on. And right now, what you can see, I'm gonna share my screen here. It's called the Open Database Project. This is the first stage, and later this year, there's gonna be the uploading of the complete renewal of the Database Center as well. This is a screenshot from the Open Database Project. Part of it is to search, enter the family names, the place of origin, and then you can see family trees, images from those places. And I invite you all to search. As I mentioned, it's still the beta phase. So by the end of the year, hopefully you'll be able to see a lot more as well. But when we're looking at the Database Center here, I wanted to show the screenshot of an app. This was developed by Beit Hatfutsot together with the Israeli Ministry for Social Equality, as well as also partnership with the Ministry of Education and with Yad Ben Tzvi, as an app destined to help collect the stories, personal stories from Jews from Middle Eastern countries and North Africa, called Seeing the Voices. And here I wanted to show the actual website. And this is something that is online. You can already log on and see this. I'm going to, again, share my screen right here. Here we go. Okay, so this is the website, the National Project for Documentation of Jewish Communities in Arab Countries and Iran. And what we can see here, there are close to 500 interviews with oral histories from Jews from these countries. We mentioned Tunisia just now, Libya, Egypt, and able to search both by places and by topics. And here I chose to show you two of these oral histories that were collected by JIMENA, and this is really a very important partnership for us. We can see all of these interviews right here were collected by JIMENA. Right now, this is one that I showed, that I picked out just to see the very, very beginning. And this now appears, this is part of the database, the new databases. We can see here.
They immigrated to Singapore. And went to Calcutta. And from Calcutta, at some point, they immigrated to Singapore.
We can see here, and this is Rachel's story, and I wanted to show here, this is Mali Mazal from Egypt. She has a beautiful, beautiful interview taken here when she was over 90. And here she also finishes with a song about Wait, I see that Joanne wrote from Yemen. This is your mom. This is amazing. It's amazing. I'm sorry. Egypt was Rachel before. I'm sorry for my mistake. And I can't believe that this is beautiful. So I'm very, very excited. Thank you. You're welcome to share more here on the chat. I love this interview and I love this song. This is something that really is very dear for us, and also using when showing the power of these interviews and the importance of these stories. So thank you for sharing that. Toda rabba. I'm gonna put the link right here so that everyone has the direct link. And of course you can go back to the Seeing the Voices homepage and also search specifically for interviews that came through JIMENA as well. Through the app, Seeing the Voices, that's something that you can download on the App Store and upload stories as well. It's really important for us to get for all of us to get as many stories as possible. So we talked a bit about the museum. We talked a bit about the database center and also how we collect further stories. And for our last stop, and before I open this to questions, is I wanted to talk a bit about the educational work at the museum. As I mentioned, we have we work with groups and visitors at the museum, but we also work with Jewish communities around the world. And in our department and our team, we're in touch with communities from over 40 countries that our concept with working with them is, again, you are part of the story, personal stories connecting to the greater story of the Jewish people. And then the question is, how do we make these stories alive? How do we encourage students, families, adults to tell these stories and to share them? And here I wanted to show you two different examples. And the second is, and this is also open for you as well, and to continue this, making these stories even richer and collecting more of them. The first is through a program called My Family Story. This is a flagship story of flagship program of Beit Hatfutsot, where we have kids from over 30 countries that are doing a Roots Heritage project. They have to interview their grandparents or older family members. They have to make a world map where their family is from and collect objects. But they also then, not only do they have to do the research, they have to think about how they're going to tell their story. And as a museum, we encourage them to do this visually and to think in creative ways how they're going to tell their story. And I wanted to share two examples here with you. One, and I think these are also great examples about how these stories also from Middle East, North Africa come alive. So this right now we're looking through the catalog of My Family Story. You can see that this is from South Africa and really from around the world. And here, this is from Dylan Ben Chamo. Dylan is a student at the Harkam Hillel Hebrew Academy in Los Angeles. And what you can see here, I just want to make sure you're going to be able to hear him. 1 second, right? I need to share with the computer sound. There we go. You can see Dylan, who's going to present his.
Which my family roots. Hi, my name is Dylan Yechiel Benemu, and this is Glilat Bisman, Scrolling in Time. My family story displays a Sefer Torah. And like any other Torah scrolls, the precious parchment inside contains the history of the Jewish people. But my Torah scrolls are a little bit different. They contain historical moments in time in which my family roots identified with their faith, the state of Israel, and Jewish traditions. And it also contains significant items that connect my family to other Jews around the world. When you first open up my Torah scrolls, the first thing you'll see are stories about my grandparents' immigration from Burma, Algeria, Morocco, and India. You'll also see symbolic items that were carried down from them. Embedded in my scrolls, you'll also see my grandfather's childhood Iraqi tunes that he carried with him all the way from India to Los Angeles, where he reads as a chazan in a shul that he co-founded. You'll also see stories about my other grandfather, who used to work as a tailor.
So this is one glimpse of Dylan and how he tells his family stories. You can see it's also visual, and also and we can hear the audio as well. Another example here that I prepared is this is Liel Bag from Israel, and she tells the story of her great grandmother and great grandfather from Iraq. What I loved about her display is I want to show you. I want to show how it looks. This I didn't mention, but this is a worldwide competition, and actually the winners, then their displays are put on an exhibit at the museum. So once a year, unfortunately this year we did everything virtually, but usually we have a physical exhibit at the museum that's made by kids from around the world telling their family stories. And right here, this was a display that was in. She talks about her grandparents. This is the spice shop from her great-grandfather, and also the jewelry shop of her great-grandfather from the other side. And what I loved about this display is, again, we're a museum, just the visuality of how she included the Arabic here as well. As you know, here in Israel, very often the Arabic has different connotations, and it was so important for us the first thing that when you walked into the exhibit, to see that as part of the rich Jewish culture from those countries. So that was here Liel's display as well here. And just, I couldn't help it but show you the example. We talked about the past, but also the present. And here I really had to show you this example of what we got this year is technology and ways. This we got from Gabriel Zayat from Mexico City. And look what he did. He did a Waze, programmed it from where his family is from. It starts out from Syria, from Khaleb, from Aleppo. He then goes to Alexandria, في بلدة سوريا الساحلية.
قضى الوقت في السفر 5 أسابيع للوصول إلى ميناء الأرجنتين في بوينوس آيرس، وتأخر في الطريق ب7 4 أسابيع وحركة.
That right there. And the next resource, and then I'm going to open our discussion to questions as well, and I would love to hear from you, is a worldwide worldwide story collection. Because when we're talking about stories coming alive in homes and families around the world, we want to also have a place where we can collect these stories, right? The database, we have I showed you the oral testimonies. And in this story collection, this is also a place also for videos and testimonies there, but also for written testimonies collected in intergenerational connections. So this is the world map. We can click on any country around the world and read stories that originated in that country. Many of the stories are in Hebrew because they were uploaded from Israel, but some stories are from the States and in English, and stories can actually be in any language. We have in French and in and also in Russian and Spanish. So I clicked on Lebanon. So you can see right in here, there are 34 stories from Lebanon. And you can see that these are stories that are collected with kids and either grandparents or older adults in schools. This is Rita's story, and they do a selfie together, a picture from now, but also included pictures from the past. And she talks about being born in Beirut in 1951, and then she talks about how they then came to Israel, and here she talks about how they spoke French, and they listened to Arab to different music. So this is a real glimpse into personal stories as well. This is another example, again from Lebanon, and how they came through. They got to Israel through escaping through a coffin from Syria to Israel, and that was how they got here. So having these stories come alive and being told to the next generation, and that comes alive here in this worldwide story collection. Now I would like to open this discussion to questions. I know I spoke a lot, and I would love to hear you as well. So I'm going to look on the chat right now. Feel free to write in questions. Okay, so I see one here. Is there any search available to find common genetic roots between Jews of different countries? Okay, very good question. We, Beit Hatfutsot, the museum, we don't do genetic testing. Our databases we include things that are uploaded by people around the world, obviously gone over. One of our partners is MyHeritage. You can upload a family tree through MyHeritage, for example, and then it comes to the museum. So they do a lot of DNA testing, and we're happy to partner with them. So thank you. Other questions? I'm going to look in the chat and see if I missed anything. Okay, so there was the photo of community. I'm not sure when it was taken. That's something we can look back on in on the community website. I'm including it here again. Any other questions that anyone would like to ask? Please feel free. Thoughts, impressions. I'll share that what you saw today was a small glimpse into the synagogue gallery. We have additional models also from other areas as well. There's a model from Syria. There's an interactive showing also a lot of synagogues around the world. And also in the various, we have an exhibit now on Jewish humor, an exhibit on Jewish heroes with very large representation from Jews around the world. So Rochelle asked, thank you, about linking to other online resources and databases, such as online old cemeteries. So the answer is yes. Part of the vision of the new databases is that you can search the Beit Hatfutsot databases, but we'll also have connections with other databases from the Jewish world. So that way you can then have the search results, if you're searching from your family or from a place, that comes up from our databases, but also from other Jewish databases as well. So the answer is yes, and that's something that's continuing. And that, okay, let me see the countries. Okay, so about the museum access virtually. So there are two ways to access the museum resources. One is online through the website, through the museum social media, our Facebook page, Museum of the Jewish People at Beit Hatfutsot, and also the Facebook page called The Jew in You, which also has a lot of content from the museum. There's a museum blog that has excellent information and really wonderful stories. And the other way to access the museum virtually is through virtual tours. That's something that we had developed in our department, and with little did we know that it would be so needed these days. So that's something that we do for groups, for summer camps, in different galleries of the museum as well. And I want to here. Can the database info be used in documentaries and other films? So here, really, it's a question of copyrights. Obviously, they're each photo or video has its own copyrights as well, and our staff will be very happy to assist with that. And also, we were asked about donating to the different collections and photos, and that's something that we're also very open to as well. So, so thank you, thank you. And here I also want to thank, again, thank Shula, and also thank Sapir for hosting and for making this happen today. And we look forward to, first of all, we look forward to staying in touch, and also I look forward to meeting you in person, hopefully very soon after we can travel again. And we really look forward to welcoming you at the museum. Sapir, thank you.
So much, Yael. I think Shula want to say something, and then I will.
Yes, somebody asked about the DNA, and I wanted people, Yael responded about our partnership with MyHeritage, but I wanted people to know that we were actually offered by a number of entities to be an agency for DNA collection, but we cannot do it because we are partially subsidized by the government of Israel. And as a result, there are some rules and regulations that we cannot actually do that. The other thing that I wanted to mention, you saw some photographs from Jerba. In May of 2019, I was there with the president of JIMENA, who is cannot be with us, Gina Waldman, who cannot be with us today. She is from Libya, and I want to take the opportunity to thank her and to thank Sarah Levine for jumping on this idea of partnership the moment we met. And one of the things that we will be doing is working with other museums and other entities in order for our vision of the importance of representing the diversity of the Jewish people and the stories of Jews from all over the world in every entity that is dedicated to telling the story of the Jewish people. And finally, I want to thank Yael for what I think was a most spirited, exciting, enthusiastic representation of Beit Hatfutsot, and to you, Sapir, for bringing it together. And may I suggest, I think this specific perspective it's a sort of a slice of what Beit Hatfutsot can offer. And even though there were people here from different parts of the country, of the world, it really shows us that there is great interest specifically in Jews from Arab lands, and maybe more of these kinds of virtual tours can be promoted. And we, Yael, I'm speaking on your behalf, we will be delighted to run them again. So thank you all for participating, and thank you to you, Yael, and to you, Sapir.
Thank you so much, Shula. Thank you, Yael. This was fascinating. I learned a lot, and I hope everyone that attended the session, when they get to Israel, the first thing they're going to do is visit the museum, of course, after the pandemic. I want to mention again, Seeing the Voices. It's a wonderful, wonderful app and a website of oral history archive of Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews sharing their personal story, but you can also go to the app and upload your story. So everyone can go from their couches, do a video and upload it. And like Yael mentioned, there are 500 videos. My family from Jerba uploads some videos there. I found some videos in the app. So that's a great resource, and I hope you're gonna use it. Thank you, Shula, for being here and doing this. If you have any questions, I think Shula wrote her email in the chat. So you can send her, or you can also email JIMENA with any questions you have. We're gonna send everyone the website, and we'll try to collect all the resources to have one email, so you can have one email with everything. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Shalom.